2016 Canadian documentary, The War at Home, some shocking statistics behind domestic violence in Canada are revealed. 1 in 5 women experience some form of abuse in their intimate relationship. 83% of the victims of spousal abuse are females. And on average, every 6 days, a woman in Canada is killed by her intimate partner. Every year in Canada, 362,000 children witness or experience family violence. And across Canada, over 300,000 women, along with 2,900 dependent children, are living in emergency shelters to escape abuse. Sadly, the numbers for the Sault Ste. Marie and Algoma district tell a similar story. Today, we'll spend some time with frontline workers from Women in Crisis to take a look at the meaningful work that they do in assisting the victims of abuse with navigating their way out of relationships that are not only unhealthy, but sometimes deadly. I'm Tim Murphy, and this is On Point. We'll be right back. Welcome back to On Point. Women in Crisis is the focus of today's episode. And joining me in the studio right now, Julie Strachan from Women in Crisis and Sarah Pachaco. Thanks for being here, ladies.
Thank you for having us.
You're a pleasure. Julie, your title is Child Support Worker and Education Awareness Worker.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks for being here. And Sarah Pachaco, your title, wow, Sexual Assault Abuse Crisis Counselor. Heavy words, sexual assault, abuse, crisis counselor. A day at work for you can be pretty trying, I would imagine?
It can be. It's work that can be difficult at times, but it can also be incredibly rewarding, and that's why we keep doing the work that we do.
I would imagine so. And how many years have you been working as a counselor now, Sarah?
I've been doing this role for about 6 years now.
Okay, so in that 6 years, we talk about self-care when you're working in the social working field, taking care of yourself, because burnout can happen. Mm-hmm. There's also that thing where you take on the problems of people. So there's a term for that too. So have you obviously found a balance in your life where you're able to do the work and then go home and raise your family?
Absolutely. You have to find a way to be able to do that. So you have to be able to tap into things that you enjoy doing. You have to even sometimes visualize leaving the work at work. When I walk out the front door, I kind of visualize myself leaving it behind and going to my family.
How did you come to this work, Julie? What's your background? Are you from Sault Ste. Marie originally? Or?
I am. I'm from the Sioux, born and raised.
Right on.
I went to Sioux College. I took the Child and Youth Worker program.
Excellent. And
throughout my time in my 3rd year placement, I was able to do a placement period with Women in Crisis in the child support program. So I kind of fell in love with it from there. When they were hiring, I got the opportunity and kind of jumped on it.
How many years is that now?
13.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Whoa,
yeah.
That's amazing. That's such a long time to work in a position that's, well, I mean, as you say, so rewarding too, right?
Absolutely.
And what about your background, Sarah? What brought you to Women in Crisis?
I always knew I wanted to do something to help people. And I found there was something so empowering about being a woman and helping other women. So it just felt like a really natural position for me to get into. And
it's a residence, Women in Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
How many residents can you handle at one time?
We have 24 beds in the shelter for women and children.
For women and children.
Mm-hmm.
How often are you at capacity?
There's not a whole lot of times that we are at full capacity. It absolutely does happen. We do often have a lot of the beds filled, but to be right at capacity isn't something that's happening on a regular basis.
This is good news.
Yes.
Because I think one of the stats before was at some point you were like 103%, like you were over. Do you see a difference in 13 years and 6 years? And I know I've heard some of the numbers, we can talk about those a little later, but have you experienced in your time with Women in Crisis a decline? Do you think the education component and the awareness raising component is helping? Is it making a difference?
I feel like we talk about it more. We're out there more. It's not something that we keep behind closed doors. We're out there, we're promoting our work. We want people to understand what a healthy relationship looks like, what an unhealthy relationship looks like, and bringing them that information, I think they come forward and they speak up about it more. So, as opposed to when they used to just...
Same thing about the mental health awareness, all of those things. It needs a voice, right? It needs to be heard. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about the awareness raising and about sharing the experiences of the women who are in crisis. Because that's a huge part of it too, is educating the public about what is going on. So what we're going to do coming up in a couple of segments, we're going to do an exercise that you perform with care workers, with family members, with, I guess, do you actually perform it with clients as well? Or is it more?
We can do it with clients. We oftentimes do it with police officers, people that might be coming across women that have been victims of abuse and violence, to help them have a better understanding and give them that visual of what it's like for them. So when these people go and approach them to try to offer services or help, and they might be met with resistance, for them to have a better understanding of why they might be met with that resistance.
All right, so stay on point with us. We're going to take a short break, 60-second commercial break. We'll come back with Julie and with Sarah, and we're going to try an exercise, the blanket exercise, to show us a little bit about what it's like to be a woman in crisis and sort of feel how they feel. All right, stay with us. On Point. Julie and Sarah from Women in Crisis. Now, Sarah, we were talking during the break, in the first segment, there was a term that I was trying to think of about when you're working in either social work or in the medical field, and you're dealing with clients who've had trauma, and sometimes that stays with you because you're a caregiver. It's called vicarious trauma. Of course, now when I said it in the moment, all like the three of us, deer in the headlights, yeah, there's a thing. It has a name. Yeah, it's a thing. So it's vicarious trauma, and basically, can you describe it for me, vicarious trauma?
Vicarious trauma is something when you're hearing people's stories all the time and you're helping them work through those processes in their lives, and you take things on yourself and you bring on those experiences as if they're your own, and you need to be able to separate yourself from that and not.
Exactly, and that is sort of the training that anybody who works in crisis situations has to deal with, right?
Yes,
and as you said, even somebody who's witnessed something traumatic.
Yes.
You don't have to be a crisis worker. It can just be somebody who's witnessed something and you carry that with you. So that's all about that self-care piece,
yes,
right? And
huge.
Sharing, debriefing after all those kinds of things too. Yeah,
absolutely.
So Julie, now we're going to do this exercise. Can you tell me what this is all about?
Okay, so we're going to do our blanket exercise. With the blanket exercise, I'm going to place blankets over your head, one by one. Each one is going to go with a sentence from Sarah that symbolizes some kind of trauma experience throughout your life. So as we pile up these blankets on top of you, each one is going to show you how you feel more enclosed, how you don't want to speak out. Maybe there's reasons you feel that fear. So anything that kind of relates to a woman as to why she would stay in an unhealthy relationship. A lot of people want to know, why don't they just leave? Just pack up your stuff and just go. But it doesn't work that way. There's so much more to it.
And this is going to help us understand that from a different perspective.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I think I'm ready. So apparently if I get a little panicky, I can give a little tap and we're going to stop. But,
yes.
Because I hear you've had even some police officers have struggled with this exercise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, I'm ready when you are, Julie.
All right, Sarah, go ahead.
Okay, so we're going to get started, and we're going to read through the stories of a woman's life and what she might be experiencing.
Okay, so and we're purposely having Sarah read off camera while we do this exercise on camera, okay?
Right.
Okay, I'm ready when you are.
When she was 4 years old, someone who visited her family sexually abused her. The secret continued for years. She never told her parents because it seemed like they were always fighting. Plus, most of the time, they were never home and her older sister had to take care of her. Even if she wanted to tell her mom about the abuse, it seemed like her mom was always drinking. Now she wonders if her mother drank while pregnant with her. Maybe that is where her learning disability came from. She was sexually assaulted at age 13 and had a lot of boyfriends after that. She got pregnant at 16 and dropped out of school. She thinks she has undiagnosed mental health, but has not talked to a doctor about it. She has been in a few abusive relationships and has struggled to find a safe place of her own. She has turned to street drugs and alcohol to deal with all the abuse and violence now and in the past. CAS has taken her children from her. Her partner keeps telling her she is not good in bed, not fit to be a mother, she is stupid, a slob, she can't do anything right, no one else would want her. He tells her, go ahead, call the police. Who do you think they'll believe? You are a loser. She is very alone and isolated. She has no family, no friends, other than people who give her the drugs. Her family thinks they have done what they can. She is afraid. Now that all the blankets are on you, Tim, we're going to ask how this makes you feel.
All right, so we're going to take we're going to go to a quick 60-second break, and when we come back, we'll discuss what I'm feeling right now, and then we'll carry on with the exercise. All right? Stay tuned on point. Woo.
Okay, so
Anybody who's tuning in right now might think this looks pretty funny, but I'm going to tell you there's nothing funny about this. So this has been an exercise talking about a woman who's in an abusive relationship and how over time each blanket stands for a trauma that's happened in their lives. And so now you wanted to ask me how I'm feeling. Is that correct?
Yeah, how are you feeling being under there, Tim?
It's extremely uncomfortable. It's not only is it hot and claustrophobic, it's difficult to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, as the blankets, my neck is sore. I'm actually feeling like physical effects to of this as well, almost like there's tension, holding my head up. Yes, it is not at all pleasant.
Do you feel like you would be able to go to work every day like this, to pick up children from school, to make phone calls that you need to make to access services that might be helpful for you?
No, I would feel pretty helpless in this situation. I don't, it's just a matter of even just breathing and trying to just focus on not, it's taking a lot of energy just to focus on not panicking, actually.
Yeah. Absolutely. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start taking the layers off and showing you some of the ways that women in crisis can help with all of these layers.
Okay.
So someone tells her about women in crisis and she begins to access our services. We support her in knowing that she is not alone. We provide 24-hour walk-in crisis line services to help break her isolation. We work together with her to help build up her self-esteem and self-confidence so she can feel empowered and know she is a good mother, she is intelligent, she can do lots of things right, she is wanted. We help her to develop the tools she needs to change her inner dialogue. We can support her in phoning the police and sitting with her through the process if she so chooses. We can support her by sitting with her during her meetings with CAS. We can provide support as she develops a plan to have her children return to her care. Things such as safe housing, referrals for parenting programs, groups, and self-care. We provide tools to help her cope in healthy ways and manage day-to-day triggers and challenges. If she wants help with substance abuse issues, we can do that with her as well. We provide a safe space for her as a shelter or as a place to come and talk about her past and learn ways to heal from her abuse and violence. We are here 24/7 for her. We can support her in speaking with her doctor and other community services to get help with any mental health issues she feels she may be struggling with. We can connect her with parenting resources, young parent educational support, and how she can obtain her high school diploma through community programs if this is one of her goals. She can access counseling with a sexual assault abuse crisis counselor at Women in Crisis to talk about her sexual assault at 13 years old. We can help her to understand how it has affected her life as a whole and that it was not her fault. She is connected with a long-term counselor who will work with her to talk about and heal from her childhood sexual abuse. She is given tools to cope and an outlet to talk in a safe space as they work on goals for moving forward in a positive and healthy way. Counselors work with her to talk about and start to heal from her childhood experiences and the possible void she feels in being raised by a sibling or other family member, and the violence surrounding her growing up. She no longer has to remain silent. How do you feel now that all of those layers have been removed?
Wow. It was remarkable, but the fact that these have the light can get through at some point, I couldn't wait to see the light again.
Yeah. Everything is better and brighter, and I can breathe, and I'm not afraid anymore. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's exactly like you said, once we remove those layers, you can breathe again, you can stand taller.
Well,
right?
and what you were saying too was it was hopeful. I mean, it's amazing. You actually feel despair when you're in there,
Yeah.
because of what you're hearing. But then when you're talking back to me and you're removing them, I was wishing you would go faster. I wanted the help to happen faster.
Yeah.
But there was promise.
Yeah.
And you know, when you were putting those blankets on, everything was bleak and it was despair. And then on the upside of it, you were giving me hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And women often feel that way too, right? They want to get out and get away and it just be over, but it doesn't happen that way. It is a process. It's a process of her own healing. It's a process of her confidence being built up so that her ex-partner can't continuously break her down and get her to return, right? It's a process of her moving forward. Every little bit helps.
One of the things also that you talked about when we were discussing doing this exercise was the fact that the blankets are off me, but they're still here.
Yeah.
So the trauma is still present.
Mm-hmm.
I can still see all of the representatives of the trauma,
Mm-hmm.
but because of the services and the help that I've received, that when you work together with counselors and with community support, that the trauma doesn't go away. You just learn how to deal with it, and then you can see above it and beyond it.
Absolutely. It's still there, but it's not all-encompassing for you anymore.
It's like addictions.
Yeah.
I mean, when you have an addiction, the addiction doesn't go away. You just learn how to live with it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And you learn the tools on how to deal with your mental health issue or your addiction or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also, like when you got to the very end, I almost saw the light. You were talking about the rape when she was 16, or the sexual assault, or whatever the term you used, I believe it's just the sexual assault.
Mm-hmm.
That was the moment when all of a sudden I could see light and I could actually get a decent breath again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's pretty powerful, because
Mm-hmm.
that trauma at that age is the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was the first blanket on, was it the sexual assault was the first blanket on?
The first blanket on was when she was sexually assaulted at 4.
Oy, gewalt.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yes. You see what I'm saying though? I could actually physically feel the difference at that point when we got to that trauma. Okay, we have to take a 60-second break. We've got lots more to talk about when we come back, because some of those powerful statements you made and the work that you do, I want to get on to that. So once again, hi, I'm over here on point with Women in Crisis and Tim Murphy, and we'll be back in 60 seconds. Stay with us. We're back on point with Julie and Sarah from Women in Crisis. Thank you again for being here. And this exercise, let's talk a little bit more about what I just went through here. I had heard an analogy about feathers, which is similar, that when somebody drops a feather on you, you go, it's a feather, whatever, big deal. 2 feathers, 3 feathers. And if the feather represents abuse, and it can be slight, it can be just a little dig, the way you say something, the way you look at someone, the way you speak to them, the tone you use, or then it can be physical. There's emotional, mental, physical, all the different, and if each one of those actions is just a feather and you think it'll be fine, you brush it off, it's nothing. And then eventually you're covered in feathers, you're suffocating under a bunch of feathers, and all of a sudden you realize in totality what that abuse has caused over time. I'd heard that analogy. This exercise brings it all home even more, that with every layer. So who you connect so many community partners to the women that are in crisis. Mm-hmm. Can we go through again the list as you took the blankets off, the 12 things you said as you were taking the blankets off me? Can we go back on some of those,
Absolutely,
Sarah? Only
yes.
because it was very hard also to focus under the blankets. All I wanted was for it to be over, and I was trying to pay attention to the things that were making me feel better, but sometimes I was just a little self-absorbed. Before we get to that, Julie, police officers who've done this exercise have responded similarly to how I did?
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
We actually had one that had to ask us to stop because they couldn't bear the weight. It was making them feel really claustrophobic and panicked, and they needed to get out.
So then when you turn it around and you speak to the police officers who participate in an exercise like this, and you say, now, you show up at a household or at Women in Crisis or wherever this, or the hospital, wherever a woman in crisis is, and they sit down and they talk to her and they want to ask her questions, they want to know what her situation is, and she's not giving them answers.
Yeah.
She's not able to verbalize.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think I could have either.
Yeah, and that's the whole idea, is to help them have that understanding of why they might struggle to answer the questions that you have, why they might struggle to be able to move forward on their own, and why they might not be reacting in the way that you're hoping that they're reacting and doing the things that you want them to do. They're under all of that weight.
There's there was a woman with Alzheimer's. She works for the Alzheimer's Society, and her name is Tipa Snow. I went to a workshop that she did, and it was once again they had first responders and police officers teaching them what it's like to be a person with dementia in a situation. All of this training is so critical for our frontline workers and the first responders to understand how there are certain ways that you need to deal with these victims.
Absolutely.
And victim shaming is still unfortunately so prevalent in our society.
Yes, it's huge. And not just police officers, but society as a whole, right? That stigma, like Julie talked about earlier, why don't you just leave? Why don't you just pack up a bag and go? And your example of giving the feathers was so perfect to capture that idea that oftentimes abusive relationships happen just in that way. It's something small and we sweep it under the rug, right? Or we brush it aside and we make an excuse for it, and then something else happens. It's not where somebody comes up and says, hi, I'm Bob, I'm an abuser, want a date? And you say, oh, okay, that sounds great. That's not how it works. It works exactly how you were describing it with the feathers. And so it's easy for us in increments, excuse it, and before we realize it, we're in the midst of it, and it's very complex and very difficult and sometimes unsafe to get out.
Oy, unsafe to get out.
Yes, one of the things that people don't realize is when a woman chooses to leave her abusive partner can be the most dangerous time in her life. And that's why it's so important that she knows the resources that are out there, or that friends and family know those resources that are out there. Women in Crisis, for example, can do extensive safety planning with women so they can plan every step of the way to get out safely.
So that must be a situation. I can't even imagine the situation where a woman has actually found her way to you to say, I am in this situation, I need to get out, and then you start planning how she's going to remove herself from that situation, but she still has to go back to that environment because she can't just up and leave. As you say, that could be life-threatening. We've got to take a short break. We'll be back in 60 seconds with more On Point. Stay with us. Thanks for sticking around On Point. I'm Tim Murphy, joined by Julie and Sarah from Women in Crisis. We were sitting here during the break, and there was just silence in the room. I was saying, there's so much to think about. I mean, my mind is racing right now, thinking about this situation and what we're talking about. And I said, you ladies think about this every day. But then you pointed out, think about it as one thing, living it. Imagine living this kind of nightmare. And Julie, we were talking about how the relationship, many of these relationships started in a place of love and caring.
Absolutely. You meet a person and you decide to invest yourself in that relationship, right? And all those steps that we all experience within our relationships, building a healthy relationship, you experience when this individual is unhealthy as well, right? You fall for them, you build a life together, and then things start to fall apart, and you fluff the feather away.
Yeah,
It's
because
just,
then children are involved.
yeah.
Finances are involved. Now we've got a house and we've got children and we've got careers. And while all of that, you're trying to maintain all of that while this is going on.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the services you provide to help get the blankets off, right? Mention some of the liaisons that you do again. So with you can liaise the victims with law enforcement, with legal aid?
Yes, and one of the things that's really important for people to understand is we truly believe that women are experts in their own life. So if a woman chooses to go to the police station and make a report, we can go with them, we can sit with them, we can support them in that. However, we would never force women to make that decision. We would never force them to get care for substance abuse they may be struggling with. It's always their decision, and if they choose to do that, at that point we can help them and support them with all of those things. Things even as simple as making the phone calls for them, right? Helping them fill out the paperwork. When you have all of that weight on you and all of that stress and you're overwhelmed and you're exhausted and you're just focusing on trying to survive and how you're going to eat and where your kids are going to go, and people are, putting a form in front of you and telling you to fill it out, it's very difficult for them. So we can support them through all of those processes.
How many staff do you have?
I believe we have 35.
Oh, I'm sorry, I keep
30,
asking
35.
you stat things. You're not the boss.
Well, there's so many different roles within the shelter, right? That
Yeah.
we all kind of carry different hats.
The children. Let's talk a little bit about the kids that come to you. What kind of a relationship do they forge with when they're staying at Women in Crisis? Children's aid is obviously involved too sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yep, sometimes Children's Aid is involved, and we can help support them going through that process as well. Sometimes, again, they might feel overwhelmed. We can sit in meetings with them so they have a support person with them. Sometimes we can help prep for meetings. What are some questions that you might have for your CAS worker? What are some concerns that you might have? Let's write them out so that when you go in, you could take them with you and you can make sure that everything gets covered that you're worried about or you're concerned about.
And yes?
Yeah, the shelter's a lot like a home. Like
That's the
sometimes
feeling
when
I got
people,
when I went to visit.
Yeah, and sometimes when people think of a shelter, they think of like a gymnasium type of place, right? With a cafeteria and a bunch of beds, and it's not like that. It's a great big giant house. So the kids, I get the honor of working with the kids, right? I'm a child and youth worker. I get to bring the kids in my playroom and spend that time with them and build that relationship with them, and we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of deep conversation.
Yes.
But we get to help them work through those things, or we get to play games with them. We get to be silly with them. And it's a lot like a home with just a lot of people in it.
And it's transitional, obviously. So what is the average? Is there an average length of stay at the center, at the crisis center?
A couple of months is what we often find is the average. It's hard to find safe and affordable housing, right, in the Sioux. With the cost of living going, absolutely anywhere. With the cost of living going up, with the day-to-day needs, it's definitely tough. So they sometimes end up staying with us for a longer duration than you may anticipate.
You have supports in trying to get these people, the victims, into new places to live? How does that? What about finances? I mean, are you funded? Do you take donations? I mean, are there people? Can people donate money and other things? I mean, how can the community help?
Absolutely. We take any donations that people are willing to donate to us as help support us in any way. They can donate clothing, they can donate household items. We have a system now where there's a drop box where they can go and donate any of those items.
I saw that right outside the building.
Yes.
Yes.
And what happens
say
is...
where that's located.
Do we say
where that's located?
Well, there's two bins on the side of the driveway.
Okay.
where they can donate their household and their clothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We're going to take another 60-second break and come back. I still want to talk a little bit about more of the connections that you help the victims make in the community to help them get out from under the blankets. Once again, stay with us on Point. I'm Tim Murphy. We'll be right back in 60 seconds. Welcome back. This is On Point. I'm Tim Murphy. Joining me in the studio, Julie Strachan and Sarah Pachaco from Women in Crisis. We were talking about the stigma, Sarah, that is attached. I was asking whether or not you sometimes have victims come in and their family members aren't aware of the fact that they have had a daughter and grandchildren that have been living in an abusive environment. And that is a big part of the stigma. People don't want to admit to that. Is that?
Absolutely, and I think society as a whole has this idea of a type of person that falls victim to abusive relationships. And what people don't realize, and part of what we try to educate the society out there about, is it doesn't discriminate. Abuse can happen across the board. Right? It can happen to people that are in low-income housing. It can happen to middle-class people. It can happen to people, you know, that are living high-end. There's no discrimination. So oftentimes, some of these people will come forward for services, and their family will say, "How did this happen? How did this happen to my child?" Or they'll even say, "How did this happen to me? I'm strong. I'm intelligent. You know, I never imagined that I would become a victim of an abusive relationship."
Wow.
Yeah.
So then you're another huge part of, I think, a lot of the abusive relationships is isolation. Is that true?
Yes, that's huge.
That the partner will separate the victim from their friends and their family, isolate them, and then when the only voice you're hearing is that you are no good, that you're a failure, and that's all you know.
Yeah.
Because all of the positives have been taken out of your life.
Absolutely.
You start to believe that.
Yeah.
To undo that damage obviously takes counseling, therapy. You can connect people with mental health professionals.
Yes.
Also, mental health and physical health.
Yes.
If you're not being allowed out of your house, or if you're not being given time to go take care of yourself, you're not seeing a doctor, you may have medical issues. Addictions can be a direct result of trauma and abuse.
Absolutely.
So then there's counseling services there. And as an agency, you have the connections to connect the dots for all of these people.
Absolutely. Yeah. We can be kind of a core place for them where, again, we can make those referrals for them if agencies need referrals. We can make phone calls for them. We can go with them to those appointments. Sometimes taking that first step, you know, to see an addictions counselor, if that's what they choose, can be the scariest thing that somebody will ever do. It's unknown, right? And even though they want help with that, it's still terrifying for them. So sometimes just us going with them and sitting with them and being there with them and being that support for them can help them take those steps forward that they need to.
All right. So, as I think it's pretty clear that somebody who is suffering from that kind of abuse, and the same way with an addict, I think that to be able to get a clear head long enough to try to make a change, it's almost impossible to do on your own. I mean, very, very few cases of people who can reach out on their own and find those resources, make that first step, and just know that there's somebody on their side.
Yeah.
Right? That human connection is like the first thing, right?
Yeah,
where you're not shamed, where someone listens.
Absolutely. And listens non-judgmentally, right?
So let's talk then, how do they find you? Can you talk me through what might be a typical scenario for somebody, how they come to you?
Well, we're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we have a number of ways. People can access us directly at our door, ring the doorbell, come on in and have that conversation with us and start making a plan, or
24/7?
24/7. They can show up at 2 o'clock in the morning if that's what they need.
Do we give the address out here, or do we not do that?
Yes, that's fine. We're at 23 Oakland Avenue.
Okay.
So we're located kind of in more of a downtown area. So we're
Makes
accessible
sense.
by the bus.
Yeah,
by city bus.
Within walking distance
With walking distance, taxi cabs.
Well, because then once you have clients and residents, they want people to get around and walk their kids and
absolutely.
enjoy the downtown.
A lot
right?
of services that we access are
Absolutely.
located downtown.
East Street
it's
is right
close.
there, and counseling services. Great.
If they're not ready to come and see us, they can call us. Again, 24/7. Call in the middle of the night. Just talk. Get something off their chest. They don't even have to tell us their name if they don't want to. It is 100% confidential. So it's not something where they have to divulge all their personal information. They can just call and talk, tell a few things, ask a few questions, hang up and be done, and
Can we give a phone
try
number?
again.
Well,
Absolutely. Our phone number is 705-759-1230.
759-1230.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay, so walk in, call, and then for more information, if anybody wants to learn more, you have a website.
Yes.
Yes, we have an amazing website.
Amazing.
I love it.
Okay, cool. There's lots more information there available.
Yes,
And that would be www. Vicarioustrauma.com. No.
Women in Crisis, Algoma.ca.
Okay. WomenInCrisisAlgoma.ca. You can just Google Women in Crisis and you'll find
Absolutely.
you.
Yes.
I mean, all right.
Yes, it's
Listen-
womenincrisis.ca.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
The authoritative voice of Sarah Pachaco. I am a sexual assault and youth crisis counselor. It is Women in Crisis. Okay.
.ca.
I'm going to wrap this segment up. Ladies, I thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having us here.
Hey,
is
listen,
amazing.
come back again. You
Absolutely.
know, well, you're
We
gonna.
will. We will.
We have more to talk about because there's a
Yes.
whole upstream education component where we're looking at teaching people about what a healthy relationship looks like,
Absolutely.
and warning signs and red flags, and how to extricate yourself or. Yeah.
Yeah.
More education. Oh, there we are. More education from Women in Crisis coming up in future episodes. But for today, I want to thank Sarah Pachaco and Julie Strachan. See, Strachan. All I know, Julie, is that you're a champ. Thanks for taking care of me under the blankets.
Oh, you're welcome.
I felt like I was in good hands. Sarah, a real pleasure. Women in Crisis, doing great work in our community. Please, if you know somebody who needs help, if you need help, reach out. They're there for you, and you've heard about the variety of services available. Let's get those blankets off. Let's open our eyes, open our ears, open our hearts, open our minds. Take a breath and stay healthy. Bye for now. This has been on. Oh, wait, I got to come back and wrap things up. So stay tuned, and I'll say goodbye to you personally and privately. But for now, goodbye, Sarah and Julie.
Thank you,
Bye,
Tim.
Tim.
Bye-bye. ONNpoint. I hope that what you learned today from these first-line workers from Women in Crisis has provided some education, some awareness. If you know someone who is in an abusive relationship, obviously we would ask that you reach out and break the stigma, break the silence. And in this era of Me Too and empowerment, I think it's important to realize that the victim shaming needs to stop, and that the cycle of abuse can only end when the abusers are taught that what they are doing is no longer acceptable, they will be held accountable, and they must be revealed. So thank you to the ladies who were here today. Thanks for showing your support to all of the Women in Crisis. And if you want to find out more, obviously you can go to their website, check out their Facebook page, and certainly support them by their fundraising initiatives like Walk a Mile in Her Shoes and awareness raising initiatives as well. Thanks again for staying tuned with ONNpoint. I'm Tim Murphy. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.